Hi, Max. Here we are live, doing a special kind of combination lean publishing tip of the day and book promotion for your really awesome book, Ready. I'm going to be talking a little bit later about, doing exactly what we're doing now and kind of as a self-published author, how you can go on podcasts and live streams and stuff like that, and how this is just a kind of ordinary part of being an author these days. But before we get to that, the sort of normal, we give people some time to pop up. Most people who are going to watch this are actually going to watch the recording, and we're going to extract some shorts and stuff from that. So it's normally around about the 2-minute mark that we really get going in the conversation. That way, and it gives a few people some time to join, but mostly it gives people I can skip ahead to 2 minutes if they're waiting for the meat of the conversation. Here's the blog post. So for every one of these videos, we always have an accompanying, or we try to have an accompanying blog post. Today, the blog post features a picture of Max and the cover of the book Ready. And it has the usual kind of, helpful links and stuff like that. And when it's finally done, it'll have this video will be linked at the top. If you're following us live, you know where to find us. If you're watching this later, somewhere recorded, you can find us on YouTube at LeanPub. You can find us on X at LeanPub. You can find us on LinkedIn very easily, and we're on Instagram as well. I'm actually going to go click the button to go live on Instagram right now because it lags a little bit. So we are on Instagram, which is pretty cool. Today we're going to be talking about this awesome book, Ready, the way we've already actually worked with Max and his co-author Luniel on this, and find out about their business and what they do, and who their book is not for is actually what we're going to be talking about, just starting in about 3, 2, 1. Okay, here we are for today's Lean Publishing Tip of the Day, featuring I call this a new release interview, but the book's actually been out for a while. But the book is Ready, and it's by Max Guernsey III and his co-author, Lionel de Beer. Today we're going to talk about a sort of few interesting things. Just let Max talk a little bit about himself and Luniel and their company and what they do. And then we'll talk a little bit about the book. For anyone watching, I suggest you head out to the LeanPub blog at leanpub.com/blog, where you'll find this article at the top. And there is a coupon link, so you can get a discount copy of the book right now. I'll just put it in the chat to see who can, not in the private chat, but in the studio chat, and see who can get that. We'll get going. So Max, can you talk a little bit about yourself and Protocor and what you and Luniel do?
Sure. So I'm a second generation software developer. I've been at this for a long time. I've been at it professionally for about 3 decades, a year shy of 3 decades. And I focus on helping teams write better software, right? So execute better in software delivery. And then Luniel has been in the industry longer. He started off as a developer, but then kind of switched over to the product side. I don't know, maybe 20-ish years ago, I want to say. And so he focuses on helping people deliver what they actually wanted to deliver, right? So the two of us together, we formed Protocor to help people deliver what they want to deliver and execute on that delivery as efficiently as they can. That's the kind of the nutshell of the intro.
Yeah, and one thing I should share is this. Let's share this tab. So here's the book tab, or the book landing page on LeanPub. If you want to learn a little bit more, obviously the best thing to do is to buy the book. But we've actually had a number of extensive conversations already. I've had we did a launch video that ended up going 40 minutes, where we had a really great conversation. And then if I'm scrolling down here, you can see that both Max and Luniel have been on the podcast. So there's a lot you can learn from there. If you get the accompanying course as well, there's about 2.5 hours of conversations that we had there as well, me and Luniel, about the book and the project. So there's lots to learn about what it is about. Obviously, it's got a great description and stuff like that. But Max, I was wondering if you could take a moment to talk a little bit about who this book is not for.
Sure. Yeah. So I think there's a couple of categories of people who, I mean, maybe they can still benefit from the book, but it's not going to it's not going to provide a salve for the immediate thing that bothers them, right? So one is the kind of classic small co-located team, or small team with high enough communication that it's like they're co-located, right? Like everybody's effectively in the same room. There's this constant flow of information. That's not to say that they're not going to experience the problems that the book targets, but the the continuous communication tends to overcome that, right? Like if the CTO is sitting next to you, or the CTO is someone you talk to multiple times a day about what you're doing, that constant flow of communication is going to overcome a lot of the problems that come from a lack of alignment. Another group of people I've seen who maybe aren't quite, it's not that they're not quite ready for this. It's like they already have a measure of readiness built into their workflow, right? So ready is about making sure that when work starts, it's set up for success. And a lot of that is just getting alignment between the people who are going to do the work and the people who are requesting the work. There's other things too, but if you're in an industry that's like heavily regulated and you already go through a lot of those alignment steps almost like for legal reasons,
Right.
might not get quite the same payoff from this book as someone who is, in a more like a more commercial and less regulated setting, and they're just struggling to get what they're actually requesting implemented on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly basis.
Yeah, it's interesting about this. You talk about the coordination and stuff like that, and I love the idea of like, kind of like it's very different if you're say a startup and you're just fresh and there's the three of you like literally in a room together or something like that versus, a big company that maybe has people come just naturally coming and going from HR all the time. And, there might be in the lifetime of especially a big project, there might be kind of a ship of Theseus thing going on where there's like no one remaining from the original team by the time it's done, or maybe
Right.
even no code left over at the end either. The one thing that I
None of
think is
the
sort of
monkeys know why the other monkeys beat them when they go for the banana.
what's that? No, I don't know that one.
Oh, you don't know that experiment where they like, um, maybe this is opening a can of worms, but they put a bunch of monkeys in a room with a banana at the top of a ladder, and then they sprayed them all with water when one of them came for it, and then they started swapping monkeys in, and the other monkeys would beat them up, and eventually they got it to where it was a room full of monkeys, all of whom would beat up whatever monkey tried to go up the ladder to get the banana, and none of whom knew why.
That's very, very interesting. No, I haven't heard that one before. Um, those animal behaviorists get very creative.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Yeah, uh, but actually, really, I'm gonna have to think that one through. That's a really good image for certain kinds of dysfunctional team dynamics, and even or just organizational dynamics, whether it's a company or not.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, one of the images I really like when I was talking with you and Lanielle about this book is that like, a lot of times, especially if you're walking into an organization that already feels like it has good processes and ways of doing things, if you stop and say, wait a minute, how do we know when we're ready to start work? A lot of people think, well, now you're just adding work on top of the work. Now we've got to do this work to kind of get ready. Isn't this just more delay? That kind of thing. And the image I always like to bring up is like, if you're going to be working in a kitchen, and you're going to be making a complex set of dishes. There's a concept in cooking of like mise en place, where you get everything out and ready in advance, literally get everything out, all the spices measured, all the water measured, all the whatever stock measured and out in advance. And then that way you're much less likely to make, and it's not wasted time. You're going to save a lot of time. What you do in the end is going to be better.
Because
And
you
if
were
you
going to
have a
pull those
rigorous practice
spices out
for,
anyway, right?
sorry?
You were going to pull those spices out anyway. You were going to measure them anyway, right?
Exactly,
It's not
exactly.
like it's not like you're saying, "Oh, now I'm going to measure the spices." Before I wasn't going to measure the spices, but
Mhm,
now that I'm doing it up front, I
mhm.
have to get the measuring up, right?
Yeah.
So that's what you're saying? Yeah.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. And so the first of all, one way of convincing people to do it is to say you were gonna be doing all of this work anyway, But one of the things about that kind of doing that kind of having some concept of, okay, when are we actually ready, is not when we don't sort of necessarily start the work right away. Like say of cooking, you've got something you need to do in advance. And An example that I like to when thinking it through is like, if you don't do this kind of thing in advance, let's say it's not just you in the kitchen, but it's a team of people working together in a kitchen. If you do stuff like this, if you sort of do your mise en place all in advance, suddenly you realize something you took for granted, that people were bumping into each other all the time. You thought that was just part of your work. And now you realize it's not, because the person standing in front of their station has everything they need. They don't need to move back and get in other people's way and stuff like that. People aren't crossing paths and stuff like that all the time. So actually having a sort of like taking a step back and saying, okay, instead of just jumping into work, let's kind of prepare and have a notion of when we're ready to actually do the work, and that this has a profoundly transformative impact on everything you do going forward.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent analogy. I mean, that's such a great analogy, right? I mean, so much time gets wasted by people trying to do things at the wrong time. And preparatory tasks are the number one thing that I can think of that people do at the wrong time, right? They do them too late by definition. They were supposed to be done in preparation, and instead they get done as part of the work.
And yeah, the system that you have is called requirements maturation flow. So it's not there's a lot of humor, some of it dry and very funny in the book, as I recall. But there's a kind of serious kind of theoretical element to it as well, where there's this construction of this uh, system called requirements maturation flow. So I was wondering if you could take a moment just to talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, you would just like to describe it basically.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's broken down into three pieces, right? So the number one piece is creating time and space for teams to do preparatory work in the first place. Modern software developers, modern software development environments are not conducive to this work. The way work is tracked, the way work is planned, the way the schedule is viewed by entities outside of kind of that execution pipeline is pretty much set up to discourage that work from being done at all, let alone to allow it to happen in advance of implementation. So the first step is just setting up a pipeline in how your team uh, conducts, not just how your team, right, but how everybody involved in delivering software conducts themselves and kind of moves work to the point of where implementation can begin, so that you can start doing preparatory work in advance of implementation. And the piece of preparatory work that we've chosen to prove that all of those changes have happened is the most important piece of preparatory work that doesn't happen in most organizations. Some organizations that do BDD at least think it's happening, and maybe to some extent it is, but it's getting a shared understanding. There's just like so much value just in ensuring a shared understanding. So we create a time and place to do preparatory work and to use shared understanding, the development of and proof of shared understanding as a way of demonstrating that that time and place exists. So that's kind of the first pillar, if you will, or the foundation. And then after that, we work on a definition of done. Now everybody has heard definition of done. It's like the tambourine that gets beaten by the agile consulting community, right? They use those words, but this is not, we don't mean the same thing they mean. I think what we mean is more in line with the original meaning, with the contract negotiation meaning that existed maybe before it was even used in software development. Certainly, it's what's in the Scrum guide now if you use Scrum, and that is a bespoke definition of done. Every item of work gets its own definition of done. Now we've got tricks for making it so that you're not like doing a whole bunch of typing and repeating yourself for common definition of done elements, like there have to be unit tests or something like
Right.
that. But the point here is that every item of work is a unique piece of work. There is no This isn't manufacturing, right? There's not just like 3,000 of the same car going through the auto line just at different times. Everything we do is different. And so we need a different definition of done for everything. So we make that part of uh, a gate for when the product is done or when the work is done, and even when it can start. And we develop that in that same pipeline. And then kind of the capstone. I'm mixing my metaphors here, but I'm gonna settle on a pyramid.
Mhm.
The capstone of it all that kind of makes it really work and is the secret sauce, as it were, is bespoke definition of ready. So that is, we need to have a complete checklist in place, agreed to, that everyone agrees is the whole list of things that have to be done in order to start implementation. Now, obviously that includes the shared understanding and the definition of ready, right? That almost goes without saying. But there's so many things that can trip teams up that we don't think of. It's those bumping into the guy at the station behind you type scenarios that we don't think of. We had a client who every single sprint work was languishing in the almost done column at the end of the sprint. All of the work was languishing because the test team had to go get sanitized test data. And that was this long, it wasn't labor intensive. I mean, maybe it was a little labor intensive, but it wasn't, it was really long. It was like this long process that involved talking to other groups, and you were at the mercy of these other groups. Pulling that forward completely changed how that team's execution went. It went from failure almost all the time to success almost all the time, because that random element that was completely out of the team's control was pulled to ahead of implementation. So those are kind of the three big pieces of requirements maturation flow.
One of the kind of principles that work in that I love is the kind of the proof of shared understanding. Um, that there needs to be something, I don't know, tangible or some way of confirming that we're not all just quickly trying to get out of this process and get out of it having sort of, used the same words and walked away. There's got to be some proof that you actually mean the same thing by, as you say, that's a common thing, but by done, that you mean the same thing by ready, that you might even mean the same thing when you use the terms for like the feature you're trying to build or the audience you're trying to reach or the problem you're trying to fix. Because I found this in many avenues in life, professional and otherwise, that so much of the time, like, you can even be working on like physical, projects like construction projects, and people can actually have wildly divergent understandings of what you're doing
Yeah.
using the same words, using the same language. You can actually walk away from a conversation having completely different, well, very different, incompatible, let's say incompatible understandings of what's to be done next. So this idea of having a confirmation step that we actually do all understand what we're saying and we're using this shit same language the same way is one of the things I really like about the work that you and Luniel do.
Yeah, and that step, sometimes sometimes just having that step there works. Sometimes you have to give it teeth, right? So
Yes.
I know that sounds they're going to be like agile consultants or whoever who are like, oh, we don't want anything to have teeth, so how do you chew? Anyway, the what we found is that the proof is important, but having it always be one kind of group or person, one party, as it were, that is responsible at any given moment is what makes that proof be something that people actually take seriously, right? So if you have a team and you say, do you understand this? Do we all understand this the same way? And they say, yeah, sure, we understand it. Well, great, right? But if attached to that understanding is a complete acceptance of the fact that one of the parties' interpretations will be used, right, at the end to evaluate whether or not the definition of done, for instance, was implemented, it completely changes their perception of what do I have a shared understanding with this person
Right.
means. I mean, we're not talking about worrying about bad faith, right? You know,
Yeah.
they can't just change it or whatever. They can't just say, well, you know, I said I wanted it to be yellow, but you forgot to sew me a suit, pick up my dry cleaning. Right? That's not going to work. But in terms of good faith, right? Good faith interpretations, once we say, you know, this person is going to be the one who interprets what it means. Once you're handing responsibility back to them, and they can just say no until that happens. Suddenly, the people once sometimes they have to go like through that rejection a few times, but suddenly when they're being asked, "Do I have that understanding?" they really have to imagine, wait, what is that person's understanding? What might that person think we mean differently, right? And so it changes it. And the same thing goes for the handoff from product engineering. You say, okay,
Yeah.
well, when we do this, they're going to be the ones who are interpreting what all these things mean, what all these readiness things mean, and all that. So, you know, are you ready to hand that responsibility and that authority to them?
Yeah, that's really interesting. It kind of, to some extent, just thinking about it, it goes against in a way the kind of, I don't know, some my intuitive sort of sense of responsibility, which is like I'm in charge. To be responsible means I should be in control of everything. That's the way of not offloading things onto other people. That would be the kind of negative way of viewing it. But the positive way of viewing it is what you're articulating, which is, oh, now I making myself constrained by others in this way, and knowing that I am is this a key part of basically working in a team and not alone,
Yeah,
in a sense. And you know, solipsism is a kind of dangerous trap that we can fall into, even if we're working with other people. And that kind of, you know, breaking you out of the loop of just being concerned about your own thoughts and your own interests and stuff like that, and being tied in that way to someone else is
yeah,
not just about them passing judgment on you. It's about you having to think about what they're thinking. Is yeah, that's a really powerful idea. And not the kind of thing that you read about in books like this, on this kind of genre. I don't think you find a lot of stuff like that. And I won't name other systems and stuff like that, but that kind of introspective thinking is something that's a feature of Ready, and your other books as well. So we've been talking for about over 20 minutes. So before I let you go, Max, thank you very much for doing this today. I really appreciate it. I hope everyone can see here on the book landing page. The book is also available in a bunch of translations, and there are translation bundles, so you can get the book with the original English as well. So if if you've been watching this and you're like, boy, I wish this was in my language, it actually might be. So you can search there and you can get the bundle with the original English. So if you want to compare, because obviously if you're listening to this, your English is good enough to do that. And yeah, the blog post to go along with this video is on our blog at leanpub.com/blog. As I always like to say, if you find this on YouTube, which is probably where most people are going to find it over time in the future, or if you find it on our own website in various places, if you can't find the accompanying blog post right on the top of the blog, just click the magnifying glass and search for the keywords. And if you search for Ready and stuff like that, and Max, hopefully you'll be able to find this article. And for the next, I don't know, I assume the coupon that we're showing here, which gives a great discount on the book, is like for a limited time.
it is. It's for a
Okay.
limited time. I didn't want to limit it too much because I figured someone might be watching this, you know, a week or
Mhm.
two down the line. But it
Yeah.
is limited.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
good for about a month.
Great. And yeah, and just the last thing I want to say is that this is the first time we've kind of amalgamated a kind of tip of the day live stream with an interview. And the reason I was interested to do this is that this tip of the day blog post is basically just briefly I'll expand on it at some point later, but basically what it's making is this kind of brief point to people that, like, if you're a self-published author nowadays, you know, obviously writing is coming with an idea, having something to say. Writing it is really hard. Getting it, publishing it, if you're doing it on LeanPub, publishing it in versions is, a challenge. But one of the things you're going to have to do if you want to reach an audience is be open to talking to people in various circumstances. You know, Max and I, we've never done a live stream before, but both of us just dive in and did it with each other. I mean, and we just, dived in and did a little bit of preparation and stuff in advance. But, doing a podcast yourself, inviting yourself onto podcasts, doing Ask Me Anythings online, in-person book launches, like actually going to a bookstore, things like that, are all really important. So I've got a couple of sections here where I talk about just dive in and being open. And the last one I added, which is that when you're a self-published author, particularly like when you're an ordinary person and you're starting out, not just starting with something new. Even you might even have a big following in some areas of what you do, but let's say you start a newsletter. You might get 2 people in the first month, stuff like that, right? Doesn't mean what I'm about to say does not mean keep doing it forever, even if no one shows up. But I'm reminded of an old story I heard about a sort of itinerant rural minister, church minister, who showed up to some ranch on a Sunday morning, and only one cowboy showed up. And the minister goes, "Well, I guess we don't really need to go ahead with this, do we?" And the cowboy goes, "Look, if I go to round up the cows and I only find one, I don't leave him out in the field. I still corral him in and feed him, or her, sorry," and stuff like that. So there's a famous blog post by the very first Lean Pub author ever, who was Eric Ries, who went on to write The Lean Startup. The first Lean Pub book was his blog, 5 Startup Lessons Learned. And I think, the first post he ever posted was like, "Lo, my 5 subscribers," or something like that, right? So I just say this to hearten people. If you're getting started, everybody starts somewhere. So don't kind of dismiss someone if it's just going to lead to one new book sale or something like that. Keep in mind that that can turn into a lot more in the future. So Max, thank you very much for taking the time to do this live stream with me today, and for talking about your really great book and all the work you do.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you for having me.